Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope to bring you some valuable information today. Linear LED T8 replacement lamps. They're very hot right now. Just about every distributor I know is selling one type or another. At the same time, most of these folks don't know that there are other types. As a matter of fact, there are 3 distinct types of these products in the market today, and we're going to spend some time talking about the pros and cons of each one. Also, we're going to talk about the impact that retrofitting these fixtures has on the UL, impact on warranties for those fixtures, and a very popular question in the very recent past is what happens when you put a fluorescent T8 tube into a fixture that has been modified for LED T8s. So we've got some video and some photographs for you on that as well. And we'll share with you some free services that MAXLITE has available to all of you, and we will also take any questions that you might have. So without further ado, let's get started. First off, a briefing on, why we want to switch to LED. I think we're all on the same page here, but there's always new folks coming into the market, so a quick review. Mercury-free, as a matter of fact, all heavy metals are not associated with these types of LED luminaires. Are much easier to dim and control than fluorescents. They are a very directional light source, and that makes them much more efficient in most applications. As I mentioned, works well with controls such as dimming and daylight harvesting, smart building controls, and the like. Better efficiency of LEDs these days, certainly 100 lumens per watt and higher. Certainly fluorescents, I think, have peaked out at about 80 to 85 lumens per watt. The quality of light can really be dialed in. We can get very specific CRIs and Kelvin temperatures. And the lifespan, as we know, often misunderstood, but we're looking at, generally speaking, for these types of linear LED products, a 50,000-hour L70 life. For those of you not familiar with L70 or how LEDs are rated, you can go to MAXLITE.com, look at some past webinars where we spoke just to those trends, and those are free and available 24/7. There's also the MAXLITE YouTube channel. While some may complain that LEDs have a lower lumen per watt ratio than fluorescents, which was only true until about a year ago. Today that's not even true, but there is still a lot of product out that has efficacies of 70 and 80 lumens per watt. There simply is no direct comparison. One is delivered lumens, one is total lumens, and there's a little bit of apples and oranges there. And that's basically because LEDs are a directional light source and we take advantage of them. No need to have light going up into the fixture and then reflecting back down out of it if we can have all of the light going directly out of the fixture. The major downside with T8s is the cost over fluorescents. Obviously, there's often also some labor money associated with the initial retrofit and install. So that's the downside. But these days, with the energy savings, the lumens per watt going up and up, the return on investments are getting shorter and shorter. Your tube options. Currently, there are 3 types, as I mentioned earlier, of linear T8 type tubes in the market. Primarily, they are different by how they interact with the existing fluorescent ballast. Basically, we are either going to work with that fluorescent ballast, we are going to work around that fluorescent ballast, or we are going to remove altogether that fluorescent ballast. To determine what type of T8 might be best for you in your application, we'll take a look at the pros and cons of each one right now together. Let's call the first one Type A. This is an LED tube with an integrated driver that operates on the existing fluorescent ballast. Basically, a Type A LED tube have an internal driver that makes it possible for the lights to use the existing fluorescent ballast in the fixture. They plug directly into the most common linear fluorescent setups, such as T12, T8, and T5. So the major pro here is the ease of installation. You're basically going to disconnect the power to the fixture, take out the fluorescent lamp, put in the LED lamp, reconnect the power, and you're off to go. The downside, well, they're generally associated with a shorter lifetime. This is dependent on the longevity of the ballast. So, if you don't know the quality of the ballast that's in there and where it is in its life, it could end up in a problem right out of the gate. And unfortunately, the user just associates a bad experience with LED, which is another kind of con that we've heard about before. This can result in more maintenance costs than compared to the other LEDs, but certainly still less maintenance than the fluorescent would have been. Not compatible with all linear fluorescence is another concern. I've seen some manufacturers, and you have to be careful on the manufacturer you choose. We always you recommend using a good brand that's been in the States a long time so that you know that they're going to be here for a long time. I've seen these products made by manufacturers that were making T-shirts 2 years earlier, and now they're making these products out of China. So, you know, be wary. Make sure you're picking a good manufacturer, and check with that manufacturer for a compatibility list of the types of ballast that it really is compatible with. And the last, I guess, con on this would be is they're not quite as efficient as the others. We ran a test on a couple of the popular ones that were 18 watts, but when you measured the total power, you know, they were measuring 24, 25, and 26 watts because we are powering up that fluorescent ballast. So keep that in mind when you're doing your return on investment analysis. Are you just measuring the wattage that's printed on the lamp, or are you using the actual wattage consumed when you consider the fluorescent as well? Let's talk about the second type, Type B. This is an LED tube that also has an internal driver like Type A, but in this case, it is not compatible with that fluorescent ballast. So in this case, the Type tube, the ballasts are either removed or generally bypassed. Let me speak to that just for a quick moment. There are some areas, municipalities around the states where it can cost up to $4 to recycle an old fluorescent ballast, and you're required to recycle them when they're removed. However, in those same areas, there is no mandate that you take it out of the fixture when you do the retrofit. So we recommend leaving it there. It's not hurting anybody. It'll be completely disconnected from the power, and there's no real need to take it out, and it saves you a couple of steps as well. The pros for something like this. Well, the pros are, unlike the first type that we talked about, these LEDs are more efficient since we don't have to power up the ballast, so you have a higher lumen per watt ratio, and there's less long-term cost. By eliminating the ballast, you're never going to have to replace it, so it's only the LED driver that you're going to have to worry about, which is integral here. So it's only the lamp that has to replace going forward. And as we spoke earlier, you're probably looking at a very, very conservative minimum of about 50,000 hour L70 with a third-party tested, verified good system. Let's talk about the downside of this. First, right out of the gate, modifications take some time. You have to bypass the ballast. You have to bring the power directly to the sockets. You have to connect the sockets, all the positives together, all the negatives together. So there is a little bit of time when you are doing the install. And let me throw a note in here that when you're doing that retrofit from fluorescent to LED with this type, you can use the ballast wires. In other words, you're going to cut the black and the white wire going into the fluorescent ballast. You're going to bring that to the first non-shunted socket. In most cases, the socket's required to be non-shunted. You put your positive in the right side, the negative on the proper side, and now one lamp socket is powered up. I generally use the red wire from the ballast to go from the negative in socket 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on, and then the blue wire to go from the positive socket 1 to socket 2, and so on. So you don't have to bring any additional wires with you. You can use the existing wires that are there. Dangerous installation. Let's talk about that because there's a little bit of buzz on the internet. Apparently, they were concerned about folks who might be installing the lamp while the fixture is powered up. So first of all, that's a no-no. It doesn't take a lot to flip a light switch off for a couple of moments where you change a light bulb. But in those cases where, for some reason, people are compelled to change the lamp while the fixture is powered, it is possible with some of these Type B linear LED tubes that are in the market that if you stick one end of the lamp into the socket, like kind of on an angle, the other end is energized. Now, personally, whenever I've installed a lamp, whether it be fluorescent or LED, I kind of, had it horizontal to the sockets and kind of pushed in both ends at the same time. But if you were to put in one end, it's possible the other end gets powered, and apparently one or two people have already, taken a hit of that live energy on the other end of the lamp. So do be careful. And FYI, with a MAXLITE lamp, only one end is energized. We're putting the positive and negative on the same side. The other side is just there to hold the lamp up. So you wouldn't have that issue with a MAXLITE Type B. And as I mentioned, they're generally not dimmable. Even with a dimming ballast, these lights have few dimming options, which is generally true. You're not going to find a lot of these that are dimming. Generally, for dimming, we would recommend getting a whole new fixture, in which case everything is integrated. It's not a retrofit, but everything's designed to work together. And the cost you'll see when you add dimming is not more for a new fixture than when you add a dimming system to these kind of retrofit systems. Before we leave Type B, I do want to say that we do have a full installation video on how to retrofit a existing fluorescent fixture to a Type B LED where the driver is integral and not compatible with the fluorescent ballast. In this case, we demonstrated on a 3-lamp T8 vapor-tight fixture, and it just brings you through it A to Z, every step that you have to take. It's not so scary after all, and of course that one-time investment yields huge energy savings over time. I have a question here. If the driver goes out, the bolt, is there a way to change just the driver? No, it's integral. The drivers are basically mounted to one side of a heat sink, and the LEDs are mounted to the other side of the same heat sink. It's all about the thermals, and it's designed, without any gaps and the like. So it's really integral, and, it's not possible to change it in the field. And, that brings me to the point, Kyle, thanks for asking, that brings me to a good point on warranty. As I mentioned earlier, make sure you're working with a reputable company that's going to be around. FYI, MAXLITE just had its 20th anniversary here in the States. Anyway, make sure these products have a good warranty. I see most of the warranties for these products are 3 to 5 years. I've seen even some 10-year products, and MAXLITE has 10-year options on some of our linear T8s as well. Major price difference in the A and B. I think that Henry, that's a great question. The cost difference is shrinking. All right, they used to be a larger, where it cost a little more for the type that is compatible with the fluorescent ballast. I think they were, frankly, getting higher margins because they knew you were going to have a very low install costs. But as things get more and more competitive, margins shrink as well, and you'll see that there's a very small difference today. If you look at the overall job, the B is going to cost more because you're going to have to do that one-time wiring at the fixture. But in the long run, personally, I think it's the better choice. Patrick's asking about emergency packs. Generally not. Do understand that Bodine has a line of backup systems that can be added to fixtures that are retrofitted with T8s. I'm no expert on the battery backup systems. I recommend you contact your favorite emergency manufacturer, Bodine or Iota and the like. Kirk, good question. Is there a designated end on the LED lamp? On the MAXLITE one, it certainly is. It's the one that's marked AC power, and it's clear to the installer which end has to go to the powered socket and which end does not. Let's talk for a moment about the Type C. This is an LED tube that has a separate driver, which is not integral to the fixture, and obviously this driver is not compatible with the fluorescent ballast. Unlike the others, this integral driver is not permanently attached to the lamps, but they are wired to the lamps. In this case, down the road, as someone asked earlier, what happens when that driver fails? You could replace the driver and continue to use the lamps. Basically, the main advantage here is they are more efficient than in the other tube type. Why is that? When you are going to take a ballast and put that ballast in the same housing, in the same area as the LEDs, well, it's the toughest situation because they each generate heat, and then the more heat, it's kind of like a snowballing effect. So to compensate for that, you're going to underdrive. You're going to take the current that those LEDs are capable of, and you're going to tone that down a little bit. And the reason you're going to do that is so that when the driver heats up, the current going to the LEDs is not more than what it's designed for. So you basically have a little bit of underdriving with the integral integral driver, where that's not necessary with the external driver. So that's what makes that a little more efficient. And as far as functionality, as long as you're using a dimming driver, you can now dim these products as well. Someone asked about dimming. If you're going to dim, your best option is going to be an external driver. And the cons of this, of course, is the cost of the installation. This is the most costly. You're actually going to remove that fluorescent ballast now. You're going to mount the driver, and then you're going to wire the driver to each individual socket. So it's a few more minutes than the Type B. So it's the highest installation costs. There are some other considerations that we need to keep in mind. No matter what type of LED tube that you choose, these things are applicable. First is some LED tubes only come with a 3-year warranty. As I mentioned earlier, there's 5 and 10-year warranties out there. Why would you settle for 3? Especially since the cost difference between a premium LED tube and a kind of knockoff cheap non-engineered tube, is maybe 15 or 20% difference. So why would you, for 15 or 20%, why would you burden the customer with a substandard product? And again, if you don't know the history of this company, they very well may have been making T-shirts last year. Do you want to be working with somebody who just jumps to the most popular products? And believe me, that's more common than you think. Voltage. Pay attention to the voltage listed on the packaging. Some LED tubes are specified for 120 or 277, while others are universal voltage, where they are 120 or 277 within one tube. And then there are others where they're 120 through 277, so they pick up the oddball 208 and 240 volt. So know your voltage and understand the product's capabilities. In the case of MAXLITE'S, we have both a B and a C type. We have the internal driver that is not compatible with the fluorescent ballast, and we have the external driver. Both of ours are universal voltage, 120 through 277, so you can also pick up those oddballs in between. And you want to look at the efficiency. Basically, if you look at MAXLITE'S product line, and now I'm moving beyond just the T8s to make a general point, when you look throughout our product line, whether they're indoor products, outdoor products, new fixtures, or bulbs, the latest ones to come into our line are also the ones that have the highest efficacy. And the reason is because of the chip manufacturers. Pretty much every generation has a higher efficacy, more lumens per watt than the previous generation. And not only are they improving as far as efficacy, but the CRIs are going up, the thermal maximums are going up. Pretty much in every measurable way, LEDs are getting better with every generation. So if you've got a product that's been sitting on a shelf right now for, say, 18 months, it's probably got an 80 or 85 lumens per watt, where if you have one that came out of the gate last month, it's probably 95, 100, or even over 100 lumens per watt. So, these are all considerations. And, you got to watch your inventories. As a manufacturer, can you imagine? We buy raw LED chips, and before they've even been processed, they've lost value because there's another generation right behind it that has a higher efficacy at the same cost or possibly even a lower cost. So, we've been doing this now for 10 years. We've been designing and manufacturing and distributing LED products. So we've kind of got it down to a science. And you distributors have to start thinking along those lines as well. Putting product on the shelf without a promotion and a plan to turn them over might yield in shrinking value sitting on the shelf. Let's talk about UL. Things come in fads, and in the last couple of weeks, the majority of the questions that the tech support department at MAXLITE have been getting is about what happens when you put a fluorescent tube on direct line voltage when you've converted a fixture for a Type B LED. And we'll address that in a moment. But last month and 2 and 3 months ago, the most frequent question was, am I voiding the UL on my fixture when I retrofit it and rewire it possibly for an LED? And I'm not going to speak for UL. We work with UL. All of our products are UL. We have the right UL rating to allow you to do these retrofits in the fixture. And we're going to send here, it's just, I realize, not legible on a typical computer screen, certainly not on mine. But following this presentation, we will send you the full PowerPoint as well as this document direct from UL, which speaks to not only a linear T8 retrofit, but other types of retrofits. And obviously, the major manufacturers, Philips, Sylvania, GE, MAXLITE, and the others, we are following the UL rules, of course. So, have no fear that if you follow the instructions that come with your UL or ETL approved lamp, you are not damaging or affecting the UL on that fixture. However, if you're adding a product that is not UL or ETL tested to the UL standards, you may be compromising the UL of that fixture. So that speaks again to stick with brands and companies that you know their past, and you know they're going to be here in the future. Let's talk about the warranty of the fixture. I can only speak, obviously, from a MAXLITE point of view, but I've got some friends who are also competitors, and they have similar thinking. So right now, MAXLITE has several 100,000 linear T8 and T5 fixtures out there in the market, mostly used in high bay type applications, 4-lamp, 6-lamp. You all remember those products. Wasn't that long ago where they were the main energy-saving fixtures that we were all peddling. Today it's different, but somebody might want to upgrade, like say in a low bay application with 12-foot ceilings, they might have a 4-lamp T8 fluorescent fixture, and they might want to upgrade that to somebody's LED linear tube. And let's say that they do that, and then there's a problem down the road, and they call me, the manufacturer of that fluorescent fixture. So let's go through it. the housing itself, the lens, the frame, all of these parts, the reflector behind it, the screws, the nuts, the bolts, all of these things are unaffected by the retrofit if they get it right. Obviously, if they pulled it out of the ceiling and stood on it while they were, rewiring it, that's a different story. So if we have a problem where the housing prematurely rusts, let's say I did a bad job, I had a bad batch with a bad coating, or the lenses didn't have the proper UV protection and they turn brown. And this is discovered after a retrofit was conducted, and the fixture is no longer the fluorescent fixture I shipped out, but it's now a rewired, possibly, fixture for the LED. Well, I'm still going to honor my warranty on a rusted housing or a discolored lens, and I think you'll find that most reputable manufacturers the same. However, there is an exception. If you call me and tell me my ballast is out, and it's, say, the 4th year, and you've used a Type A where you've put a LED tube into my fixture, I'm not going to warranty that ballast, and most manufacturers will not warranty that ballast. So that's something to consider, and that's one of the major downsides. When or if that ballast fails within the warranty period, who is going to be responsible? Is it going to be the ballast manufacturer? I can answer that question. Probably not. They designed it for fluorescence. They don't know that LED tube that you put it in there. It hadn't been considered when that fluorescent ballast was designed, and who knows what that LED tube is doing to my fluorescent ballast. So that is one of the downsides there. Henry, you're right. You got to go Type B. That's the way to go. There was a time not that long ago where I was lobbying for the Type C, and that was mainly due to the thermal concerns, the heat issues. But I've turned around on that, and not because I've changed my mind, but the LEDs have actually changed. The thermal ratings of the LEDs are much higher today than they were just a year and a half ago. And today I have no fear that integrating the LEDs and the driver into a single linear tube is going to cause that to run away thermally, that they're going to exceed the maximum temperatures of any of the components in that driver or the maximum temperatures of the LEDs. So I'd say, Type B is probably the best way to go these days. Plus, also makes it easier for troubleshooting down the road when something fails. Was it the driver or was it the lamp? And with a Type C, the maintenance person has to diagnose that and possibly try to get his hands on that driver, which I think can be difficult just several years down the road because these LEDs are evolving very quickly. But smart people can come to different conclusions on B or C. I think those who thoroughly investigate would rule out an option A, mainly due to that warranty issue. Let's talk about what happens after I've done a Type B, where I put that line voltage directly in the lamp socket, and then I install a fluorescent lamp. The scenario goes like this. There are lots of smart folks who are making assumptions about this. They say, okay, your Type B sounds good, the photometrics are good, the lumen outputs are great, the life is great, but what happens down the road when some maintenance guy doesn't know that this is LED, for some reason the LED has failed, say it's 10 years later, and he just pops in another fluorescent? The glass is going to explode, there's going to be a fire, we can't risk that. In fact, all of that is myth. All of that is conjecture, and it's just not true. Let's talk very briefly about the construction of that fluorescent lamp. Fluorescent lamp has a 2-pin on each end. Those pins are actually shorted internally with a cathode. And generally, with a fluorescent ballast, when you put power to that lamp, you're heating up that cathode just enough to vaporize the mercury that's in that lamp. And then I think we all know that mercury vapor, when interacts with phosphor, gives us illumination. And that's the fundamental way that a fluorescent lamp works. And there's different types of ballast that do different things to that cathode. An instant start ballast is kind of the brute force method. It puts a lot of voltage into that filament so that it heats up really quick. A program start actually is very controlled about how it heats up that filament. It's much more delicate. They kind of work together a little bit. It's a little bit of a smarter ballast. So now let's take that ballast out of the equation. Put direct line voltage, 120 or 277 volts, right to that lamp socket. What's going to happen? You see these pictures here? These are 4 pictures that are all taken in a 0.5 second video. Blake Adams was amazing, was able to actually pull these stills out of a video that is 0.5 seconds long. And if you're looking directly at it, if you're that installer down the road 10 years from now, and you pop that lamp into a live fixture, if you're really paying attention, because it's a very quick flash, that filament is going to heat up, it's going to break and open up the circuit and cool down all within a millisecond. What you're seeing here in order is slide 1 is before we turn the power on, slide 2 is the power on, and that's that initial flash, and number 3 is Blake was able to catch it actually in its cool down. Went from the white light, which is very hot, to the red light, which is in the cool down, and slide 4 is completely cool, even to the touch, because all of this happens in a small fraction of a second. Whether it's 120 or 277 volt doesn't have an impact. And bottom line here is, if somebody sticks a fluorescent lamp into a fixture that's been modified with direct line voltage to the socket to accommodate LED, well, that maintenance guy just wasted a perfectly good $2 fluorescent lamp. But that's the only harm that he's done. There are articles and white papers on the internet, but I know the audience here, pictures are 1,000 words. At the end of this presentation, we will send you a copy of the presentation, a copy of the UL documentation, and a link to the full video where you can see for yourself live what happens when you put that power on to the fluorescent direct line voltage. So let me do a little bit of a commercial, folks, just a little bit, I promise. MAXLITE has 2 types. We have the internal driver type B, where you would bypass the ballast and bring the power directly to the socket. And again, we have a installation video that shows step-by-step how to do it. And then we have the external driver, which is the driver is separate from the unit, and you are able to replace the driver down the road. The lamps are separate from the driver circuit. MAXLITE does not offer a Type A lamp. We have full specifications for our internal and external driver, including wiring instructions right on the internet and delivered with every package. One thing I failed to say that I think is important, and forgive me, all of our Type B, where you're rewiring the fixture, comes with a very large label, 4 inches long, 1.5 inches wide, big bold print on it, that you must put in every fixture right next to the lamp sockets that you have rewired. This will minimize the gentleman down the road, the lady or the gentleman down the road, who might waste a $2 fluorescent lamp. This would be a warning to them that there is direct line voltage and that they should use the proper LED tube. If they were, however, unable to see that label, again, no harm done. John, we have some options in that regard. Go to MAXLITE.com, click on the Products button just below our logo, and click through to the Linear T8s for full details and specifications. Folks, please don't run away. I'm going to ask for about another 45 seconds of your time just to remind you that we do have the university. Kudos to Blake and others who are maintaining the university. I understand that we're closing in on about 15 graduates a month. These graduates went through all 3 courses, so kudos to all of you and all of them. This presentation helpful for you? Would it be helpful for your customers? If training of any type would be beneficial for you or your customers, reach out to me. Email is my favorite form of communication. We'd love to do a custom presentation for your customers or possibly their customers. Anything we can do to support you. Consider us unpaid employees in that regard. And along those lines, need help with rebates? Anything we can do, including actually getting the paperwork done that the utilities require, contact Joe Pater by email. He and his team can support all of your utility needs. Folks, thank you so much for your time and attention. If you could just let us know how many of you are there watching the screen, we greatly appreciate it. We'd love to know how many people are actually joining us. Show management that this is worthwhile. Meanwhile, Randy has a question. Do you have a T8 lamp that goes on an instant start ballast like Sylvania's? No, we do not, Randy. Really, our focus going forward is a Type B and possibly even a Type A if we can overcome some of our concerns and some of the obstacles that are inherent with that. Folks, again, thank you so much for your time and attention. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks again. Bye-bye.